continue to join. I'm going to share my screen just a moment. Okay, so we have a few exciting announcements. So for next month's meeting, we have SLOPAG will be giving an update on their upcoming projects and what the infrastructure bill means for them. We've changed our meetings to TBA just in not knowing what is going to be the current status of in-person meetings for February 10th. If it is in person, it will be in San Luis Obispo. Otherwise, we will let everyone know a couple weeks ahead of time. It will be virtual. Same for our fleet electrification training that we are putting together on March 10th. And that's going to be a full program. It's going to be about a half day, hopefully in person with lunch and a panel and some roundtables. Then we currently are collecting applications for our awards, our Project of the Year and Professional of the Year awards. So if you know anyone or if you have any projects that were wrapped up in the last year, please consider nominating them. We will be nominating our top projects for national recognition at APWA's PWX in August. And those are due on February 4th. And then also a call for sponsorships by the end of this month. And I believe everyone on this call receives our newsletter, but if you don't, feel free to put your email in the chat box here and I'll make sure you're signed up for that. All of this information can be found in our monthly newsletter. And then lastly, we are accepting applications from firms and public works agencies for the opportunity to host an intern for our scholarship program. So each year we fundraise to do at least one $3,000 internship. We're hoping to do 2 this year, but we'll know more in a couple months. But right now we're just gathering applications for people who are interested in hosting an intern. So this will just be funding towards that interns work at your city or firm. And more to come in the newsletter. This will be sent out. We'll also be posting it on our social channels. So if you don't follow those, please do, and feel free to share with your colleagues. And that is our announcements for today. So I'm going to be passing it over to David Appy, who will be moderating for us. David, thank you and welcome.
All right. Well, thank you, Amy. And welcome to everybody in APWA in the Central Coast. This is a topic today that I've been really interested in for, well, at least the last couple of years since I first heard about it, and just the rumblings that were in the press over time. Today, we're going to talk about offshore wind energy production off the Central Coast of California. We've got a panel of speakers today. We've got Alla Weinstein. She's the founder of Trident Winds Incorporated, a deepwater offshore wind project development company, and the CEO of Castle Wind. They have a joint venture between Trident Winds Incorporated and EMBW North America Incorporated. Alla leads Castle Wind Energy's efforts to develop commercial scale floating offshore wind farm off the Central Coast and specifically Morro Bay. Alla has been in the field of marine renewables for over 20 years. Prior to founding Trident Winds, Alla founded and ran 2 marine renewable technology companies and an industry association. She is currently Governor Jay Inslee's energy appointee to the Washington State Coastal Marine Advisory Council and U.S. Department of Energy appointed C3E ambassador to the Department of the Department of Energy Women in Clean Technology Initiative. Alla is an active member of the American Clean Power Association. She is a frequent speaker in the United States and Europe on the development of renewable energy and served as the first president of the European Ocean Energy Association. Alla holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology and a master's degree from the prestigious Thunderbird School of Global Management. And our second speaker is Nessie Sumate. She is the chief of renewable energy section for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management in the Pacific region. She leads the planning and leasing activities for offshore renewable energy projects in the Pacific OCS. Nessie brings to BOEM her extensive and comprehensive experience in the development of a range of renewable energy projects, from feasibility to development, construction, and operations in the private sector. Nessie has a Bachelor of Science in Biology and a Master's in Business Administration. And our final panel member today is Greg Haas. Greg is a Senior District Representative at the House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives. He's part of Congressman Carvajal's office, and he is involved with the legislature pertaining to offshore wind energy generation on the Central Coast. Greg has a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism from San Jose State University. So with that, our idea today on this meeting is to have kind of a well-balanced approach. We're going to hear about the political side of wind energy. We want to hear about the governmental side from Nessie, and then have Ala talk about the really exciting part, which I like, is the engineering, and I'm sure everybody will like all three of those. So with that, I'll turn the microphone over to Greg Haas, who can give us the background on the political side of wind energy.
All right, thank you, David. Go Spartans. Also, you didn't mention something that I want to make clear to people, that I am a diehard Giants fan, as you can see in the background, with the multiple World Series trophies on display. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about this. You know, on the political side, I'm going to run you through kind of what happened here regarding the offshore wind development on the Central Coast. And, you know, I'm going to leave as much as possible to Nessie to, you know, explain some of the process and things that BOEM does and how they do the leasing and those kind of things. She's the pro at that. And of course, Ala is, you know, the engineer who can, you know, we've met many, many times and can explain, you know, some of the more intricate details and technical information. So I will try to touch on this. And of course, any questions, I understand we'll have some time for questions you can follow up with. But let me pull up. If I can find it. I'm going to share this here. All right. Do all of you see a series of maps? Okay. Yes. All right. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of a timeline and why the political, some of the larger political picture to this issue. As some of you are aware, Diablo Canyon power plant, nuclear power plant, PG&E announced that they were not going to pursue relicensing in 2016. That set a whole scenario of things in line here. One is that San Luis Obispo County communities and the county school districts, the region, frankly, including northern Santa Barbara County, with the imminent, you know, problem of facing a challenge of this nuclear power plant closing and losing roughly 1,500 single head of household jobs, as well as various, you know, property revenue payments that go to the school district, go to the county. It's a significant loss. And not only is it a significant loss for San Luis Obispo County, as far as jobs and community-wise, but it's also a significant loss for our energy supply in California. Diablo produces about 8% of our California's electrical supply, and they are connected to the grid, which I'll get into a little bit more, but and they are counted on as a base load supply. Though sometimes they are not all, both reactors. There's 2 reactors. Each one produces roughly 1,200 megawatts apiece. But they aren't always running at both at the same time. They try to. Sometimes they're down for maintenance. Sometimes they're running at less than full capacity. But they operate a significant portion of the state's energy needs. This all comes into play with what happens next. So with that in mind, at the same time, the state of California was pulled together, BOEM and the state of California, I should say, pulled together a task force, an offshore wind energy task force. It has like 85 agencies in it, something like that, to look at and start mapping, hey, what would offshore wind look like? Where would it go? Where would best places be? And that kind of discussion. That started, I think it was 2016. One moment while I pull up my other reference document here. Yeah, that was in 2016, basically the same time Diablo announced. And then later on, that task force had meetings in 2018. They identified some areas that were of interest. And then in October 2018, BOEM published a call for information and nominations. And that is where we'll go to the map here. So you'll see to the far left, notice this map is a draft. It's not totally complete yet. So this information may have some adjustments to it and some boundaries needing to be looked at, but it's something we're putting together for informational and briefing purposes. But to the left, you'll see the 2018 map where BOEM identified the Diablo Canyon and Morro Bay call areas. And I'll let Nessie explain what that is. So after that point, what happened shortly after is that the Department of Defense and the Navy said that neither one of these areas are compatible for their mission. And if you notice on these maps, these dark blue lines in the ocean, those are the warning and test areas for the U.S. Navy. Well, for the Department of Defense, the Air Force and others use it too. So if you notice, entirely off the coast of the Central Coast, and this goes all the way further south to the Channel Islands and below, is a warning and testing area for our military, specifically things like off of our coastline, off Morro Bay. The U.S. carrier fleets do their final certification for training before deployment. And some of that, some of that is important is if you also notice on that left side map, the gray lines where it says VR 1262 kind of in the middle. Those gray line areas, as you can see, is that our entire northern San Luis Obispo County area is crisscrossed with military training routes. And some of you might be familiar with that. They're flying, most of them flying from Lemoore Naval Air Station, but they're flying out to those carrier fleets as well as flying out to the ocean to do just regular training and things like that. And one of those routes is directly, as you can envision that route coming out along the ocean right through the Morro Bay call area. So what happened is after the Navy and Department of Defense expressed their incompatibility and drew what you might have heard as a big red map saying this entire area is not acceptable. The congressman pursued this further. He sits on the Armed Services Committee, so it has a direct relationship and review of the Department of Defense and military operations. So the congressman called for a meeting, kind of discuss this with some local shareholders as well. the Navy reiterated this is not compatible. One of the things they pointed out was early on was Diablo Canyon is really not compatible because that is where they do actual live firing of weaponry and other testing that is higher classified than I have availability to. And that impacts on the political picture, that impacts other regions of California who have the military installations that utilize that area for testing. So from that point, the congressman, after discussions, convened a meeting in 2019, August 2019 at Cal Poly. He had a meeting and called for the Assistant Secretary of Defense to come out here and meet with him, Congressman Jimmy Panetta from Monterey County, as well as officials David Hochschild from the chairman of the California Energy Commission, as well as officials from NOAA and BOEM, and some local representatives that were there as well to meet and discuss, is there a way of finding a resolution to develop offshore wind? We need the energy, we need the renewable energy to offset the eventual closure of Diablo, and also the potential of providing an offset to the loss of jobs and revenue. So after that meeting, it was agreed that they would, the congressman would form a working group with those agencies participating to try to find a solution to where is an acceptable area that would work within the perspectives of BOEM, Energy Commission, and the military in meeting everybody's needs as possible. So the next map you see, version the September 2019 map, was kind of what an in-house working group came up with. Is we discussed areas that were compatible or looked to work, and came up with this kind of mini California, as we called it. It was smaller, but it drew it closer to the shoreline. But there were avenues of it. The north, was more of a DOD thing, preference. The sanctuary area was really questionable. And the south section was something that, like the Energy Commission and BOEM had suggested as part of this. So the next step was the working group with coordination with BOEM and the Energy Commission and the task force put together the map, the third map there, in March to take to the public for public comment on what their thoughts would be on a configuration like this. Now, in between there, we had meetings, the congressman had meetings with the Secretary of Defense again, or Assistant Secretary of Defense McMahon again, as well as the congressman back in Washington, D.C., to touch base to see, should we continue moving forward with this? Is this something that is workable? And they agreed that, let's keep this discussion going. We should be able to find some kind of solution. And so then we came out with this March map and went to the public and asked them. And you can see there's different areas of that map: South, South A, North, North A. And then the sanctuary area turned into a discussion. And part of the reason is because, one, BOEM is not allowed to lease within a sanctuary by the Energy Policy Act. And the sanctuary has no form or system process for actually leasing. It's not what they do. So they would have to create something if that's what they wanted to do. That was seriously questionable. So there was no mechanism for offering leases within a sanctuary. But we wanted to put it out for the public for discussion to see what their thoughts were about locating in the sanctuary, because there might be areas where, if we continued this discussion, that it would meld into those that, next to or into the sanctuary. So the input back basically from the the areas of interest, concept map from the working group, came back to basically that the the North A areas were too close to the shoreline. They were 15 miles. People were shown maps, renderings, very good renderings that BOEM had done. Met with people in Monterey Bay, Sanctuary, all the way up and down the coast. However, remember, this is right at the beginning of the pandemic. We started this process, so it was a lot of fun trying to figure out how to do this. Then later on, so the feedback came that northern area really had a lot of opposition to it, and it was more than just public opposition to the idea in view shed. There's sensitive areas there, but also on a practicality side, industry had concerns as well about how logistically this would work, separating the two areas. Plus, it was smaller than the goal that was kind of established, that of 3 gigawatts. Finding space for 3 gigawatts was the congressman's target. One, based on that Morro Bay power plant being closed, also has connection to the grid from the shoreline. It's about a 1 gigawatt supply that it can provide. And then Diablo Canyon with its 2+ gigawatts shutting down was the other 2 that we were looking at to come up with something around 3. After that point, it was kind of in limbo. And our office, the congressman, approached Department of Defense to talk about what other angles or areas we could do. And on further discussion, kind of came back to some of the original Morro Bay call area design, but further south. And one of the reasons is, and you can see it in the version, the final version on the right-hand side. If you notice that flight route, that VR 1262 that goes out to the ocean, that the call area is south of that line. And that was something we discussed with the Navy and Department of Defense, and as part of the working group discussion and other lots of input, that could we go further west. Industry originally expressed that they didn't want to go more than 1,100 meters deep, and then said that we can work with 1,300 meters deep, which allowed us the idea to move the call area further west, which with Nessie will probably talk about the wind energy area, can expand how that happened there, but that led to that. So what we came up with was a map that was roughly 340 square miles. And then BOEM and Department of Interior took a second stab at it, and they came at it with 399 square miles. And from that point, all the way to, May of last year, that was being discussed. And finally, with meetings between congressional members, but Departments of Interior, Departments of Commerce, Departments of Defense, and the White House, the state of California, they proposed the 399, we call it the 399 map, which was, I think that's the yellow one. I'm not totally sure that's the final, that was the 399, I think that's the 399 map, which was 399 square miles, which roughly provides, it provides more than 120 square miles if you wanted to do multiple leases, like 3 leases, and allows room to move around. So that was something that industry expressed, that the state and BOEM and others have said. We originally started a discussion that they needed 100 square miles, but really it looked like it needed to be more than 100 square miles if we could find that. This agreement came out and was announced in May of last year by the White House. It has some stipulations about further protection from expanded development in the future. How that looks, we don't know yet. And then, of course, BOEM took over the process there and started their leasing process, which has led to the public scoping that ended Tuesday on commenting on the expansion to the call area and the changes to its design. So basically, that's kind of how it morphed into life from what some people were considering the death knell of the idea of offshore wind off the Central Coast, because the military's opposition to that. But you know, figuring out a way to work with them to find a solution is kind of what, you know, politics should be working on. And as you know, my boss says, we need to find a win-win-win solution, and we think we have it here. And BOEM is moving forward. Now starts the other part of the public process on what it looks like, how big it should be, where it should go, and the engineering of it, construction and operation plans. And that'll be a component, both of public discussion as well as practicality, when we find out more of what that ocean floor looks like. So I think that, you know, that kind of covers the layout of how it came to be, some of the politics behind that. Again, I wanted to point out that this was, you know, working with the various departments and assistant secretaries and directors, you know, at all levels in the agencies, you know, BOEM and others participating. The governor's office were able to find a solution that is workable, one that's viable, isn't too small, and hopefully will produce, you know, I think enough for 1 million homes of energy. But I'll let Ala or Nessie clarify that one. But it will provide that hump that exists when solar energy decreases, usage goes up. And, you know, you've probably read recently about, and natural gas has to be turned on to fill in that gap between 4 and 9. And the idea is that this offshore wind will provide that gap. It'll help provide that gap load in combination with other projects such as battery storage and whatnot. So I think that's it for me, and I'll be open for questions and any other follow-up like that.
Thank you, Greg. That sounded like a sort of a long, interesting process that occurred. I'm sure there's a lot of details and nuances to the whole, how it went down. But thank you for that. All right, our next speaker is Nessie Sumate from BOEM, Bureau of Energy Management. Nessie.
Good afternoon. And just checking, Amy, are you able to share or the slides?
So Amy, you're going to pull those up?
While she's
Yeah,
doing.
sorry, I lost my mute button for a minute. I'm
That's
pulling those up
okay.
now.
We're good.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. My name is Nessie Sumate, and I'm the Chief of the Renewable Energy Section at BOEM's Pacific Office. In BOEM, just, you know, today I'm just gonna kind of give you a little bit about, you know, BOEM, the broad goals of BOEM, and then like finish with the more specific conversation on where we are in California. So BOEM is a bureau within the Department of Interior, and we're charged with the development of U.S. continental shelf energy and mineral resources. If you can move on to the next slide, yes. So the federal waters are basically 3 nautical miles out to 200 nautical miles in the exclusive economic zone. Greg mentioned that we have no authority over national marine sanctuaries. Those are the gray areas that's shown on this map. And so it sort of kind of a natural division between our call areas that you'll see later, which is located in the Central Coast and in the North Coast. So because we have no authority to lease in the National Marine Sanctuary. Why offshore wind? Offshore wind is, we have wind onshore. I'm sure most of us are very familiar with onshore wind. The offshore wind resource tend to be stronger and more consistent than onshore wind. So it's a good resource to include in to supply the energy demand that we have here. Offshore wind turbines are going to be mounted either on fixed foundations, if the waters are 60 meters in depth, as we're seeing in the East Coast in most of Europe, or floated on floating foundations in deeper waters. So here in the Pacific, we expect that offshore wind development will be on floating foundation because our waters just quickly get deep right after the shore. So I think next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is the 4 phases of BOEM's leasing process. And I can review if there are any questions later on, but I do want to highlight a few things. It is in 4 phases. There's a planning and leasing, a planning and analysis phase, a leasing phase, then the site assessment and construction and operations plan. It is a staged process. Leases are issued on a competitive basis unless BOEM determines that there's no competitive interest. So basically we plan and we engage with state, tribal, and other federal governments and key stakeholders to determine potential areas for leasing. We award leases through an auction process. It's important to note that a lease is not authorized construction. It simply provides the lessees the ability to submit plans for additional site characterization so that they can get the information for their for project construction design, and then they submit a construction and operations plan that we review, and only after that can you have steel in the water. NEPA is very much a part of our process. It occurs in two steps. The first is prior to lease issuance. That's the federal action of issuing a lease. Typically, we conduct an environmental assessment for that NEPA process. And then after we have a construction operations plan, that's really the only time that a lessee we would know from the lessee the method of construction, the project design, the specific layouts and things like that. Then we can do an environmental impact statement. So that second review occurs after a construction and operations plan. Throughout our process, stakeholder engagement is the cornerstone of all of that. And there are several opportunities to provide public input in the BOEM process. With COVID, we've had webinars, we have task force meetings. Those task force meetings are open to the public. There are also federal register notices or other events that occur throughout this very long process. Our decisions are very much reliant on data. We get data from a variety of sources, including public information that is provided to us. We also, in addition to leasing, we have a very robust environmental studies program to inform our decisions. And we house the data that we collect in data portals that are available to the public. So you can actually see the GIS layers of the information that we have collected. In California, that is the data basin. We also have the federal data portal, which is the marine cadastre, if any of you are interested in that. All of this planning, the mechanism we use is an intergovernmental task force. Task force members are federal agencies, state agencies, federally recognized tribes. And so it is not a decision making body. It does inform BOEM's decision. So the renewable energy task force is our way for coordinating with the various governments that are involved in this process. Next slide, please. So, off and on, if you follow our process, you'll hear names of areas that we call. And so I thought that we should put this out there. So we identify call areas. Call areas are areas that we identify after we've had some stakeholder outreach to determine like the most feasible area that leasing could occur. Typically, these are larger. And so we publish these call areas in the Federal Register. And the idea is to ask for information specific to that area, and as well as to request nominations of interest from the industry for leasing. And so the call goes out in a Federal Register, we get public comment, and then the next kind of area is the wind energy area. So from the call areas, we identify wind energy areas, which are then the subject of an environmental review process, which is what's happening right now in California. So those are called wind energy areas, or WEAs. And then finally, once all of that information is completed, the wind energy area could be divided into several lease areas. And so those lease areas are what will be put out for public auction, in California. I think we can go to the next slide. So just from a bureau-wide process, we issued a path forward for leasing to 2025. This is the path that, with the administration's goal of offshore wind, to deploy 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030 to create 80,000 jobs. California and Oregon are part of this. We show here a California lease sale by the fall of 2022, this year. And then in Oregon by Q3 of 2023. So this was the first time that BOEM put out a path forward schedule to just give transparency to everyone, to let people know what we're planning. It allows us to plan staffing and all of that, but most importantly, it gives transparency to our goals in all of the regions. Next slide, please. So the Pacific office handles the leasing for California, for Oregon, for Washington, and for Hawaii. We're not in any planning phases in Washington right now. We don't have a task force established there. In Hawaii, in I think 2016, BOEM identified some call areas north and south of Oahu. And it doesn't matter, you can stay on this one. So we're not doing any active planning right now in Hawaii. In Oregon, we are in a data gathering phase, and that will lead to publication of the first one of the areas, a call area. And that we expect would happen in soon, first quarter of this year. So to focus on California, and thank you, Greg, for the history and how we arrived at this. It has been a long process. It started, like you're right, in 2016. And so now I think we have a path forward for leasing. So the two areas that we're planning on is one in the Northern California and one in the Central California. Just quickly, the Northern California is off the shore of Eureka. That wind energy area we call Humboldt was announced in July 28 of 2021. We have just issued the environmental assessment. So if you are interested in taking a look at that, that went out yesterday, 2 days ago on the 11th. That is out for a 30-day public review period ending in February 10th. We are going to hold 2 virtual meetings, one on January 25 and then another on January 26 to give people an opportunity to comment. So more specifically in the Central California, we announced the Morro Bay wind energy area in November. And so we are going through our environmental assessment process. We did have a scoping meeting, 2 of them, one in December and then the January 5th. And so the comment period on the scoping part is closed. And so the next step in the Central California would be for us to issue a draft environmental assessment. So the plan is to merge the North and the Central processes into one proposed sale notice. So the proposed sale notice is another Federal Register notice. This is where we will show what our leasing intent is, the mechanism of the auction. We may ask questions to inform a final sale notice. So this would be a good time, proposed sale, potential lease conditions will also be included in the proposed sale notice. So that's the next step after the environmental assessments are done. And then finally, after the proposed sale notice, there is, of course, a final sale notice, and shortly thereafter, a lease auction. And we're hoping that that will occur in the fall of 2022. I think that's my last slide, other than the contact information. Jean Thurston Keller is our California contact. So, feel free to reach out to her if you have more specific information requests or questions, but you can also call me for that. So with that, I yield to the next speaker.
All right, thank you, Nessie. So finally, we have Alla Weinstein, who's going to talk to us about engineering. Alla, welcome.
Well, we'll leave the best for the last, right?
That's right.
All right. So hopefully you can see my screen. I'm going to put this in play mode. There we go. So we're going to talk about technology. I'm Alla Weinstein. I'm the CEO of Castle Wind, and you heard my my bio. I guess I would say that I'm the guilty one, that why offshore wind is being developed in California. Back in 2016, Trident Winds, which is a partner in the joint venture with EnBW North America, submitted unsolicited lease request to proposing to develop a 1,000 megawatt project off the coast of Morro Bay. And interestingly enough, the eastern boundary, or the eastern portion of the Morro Bay coal area is exactly where that proposal was. So as a result of that unsolicited lease request, BOEM can, or the offshore wind development can be initiated two ways. One is the unsolicited lease request, and second is the request from the governor of the state to initiate development of offshore wind. The two kind of converged after expression of interest was expressed by Equinor, formerly Statoil, and also resulted in the formation of the task force in October of 2016. So that's how long it's been going, but we're now coming to reality of projects happening. And so with that, as you heard, the process is long, but you got to start somewhere, right? So what I'm going to talk about is technology. Until floating offshore wind technology was available, which basically relates to foundations and ability to install these very large turbines on a floating foundation, we couldn't really talk about offshore wind. And the reason why the unsolicited lease request was submitted in 2016 is because with my prior company, Principal Power, we developed that technology. Technology development started with the demonstration of the first unit, which was based on a principle called SPAR. Let's see, let's make sure you can see my pointer. There we go. So this is a SPAR concept, which is a very long cylinder, effectively. That demonstration project and installation happened in 2009. The second one was the wind float, which is the picture that Nancy saw, and you will see later on, I will show you the video of the wind float, that now both of those progressed from the prototype to the demonstration projects. But until those technologies were demonstrated that it will actually work, we couldn't really talk about offshore wind off the west coast of the United States. And knowing where things were, the technology was proven and it was moving into commercialization, the next thing you have to do is create a market, right? And so back in 2016, or rather 15, when I left Principal Power, I said, that's exactly what we need to do, create the market. And that resulted in the unsolicited lease request. Now, as some of you may or may not be familiar with oil and gas, all these principles of the floating foundation types do come from oil and gas industry. So oil and gas industry has been very instrumental in demonstrating that things can float, very large things can float. There are basic principles of technology development that are based on the buoyancy. And they are also, they also created standards and approvals and certifications procedures that we go through. So all those principles have been now adapted to the projects, because offshore oil and gas platforms, while they're floating, they're manned, and you're also dealing with carbohydrates that are, you know, quite flammable. And so the standards that you have for oil and gas platforms account for those criteria and challenges that have to be used. Offshore wind platforms, on the other hand, they're unmanned. There are no carbohydrates, so they're not as fire prone as oil and gas platforms could be potentially. And so because of that, all those standards had to be adapted, including certification procedures on how do you certify these different types of platforms that, while they're floating and they do exist in the ocean, they're carrying very large very large spinning disks effectively, right? So the challenges were very different. Basically was, how do you make a platform float and not tap over? Because this floating, or rather big turbines, they create overtopping forces. And those are the forces that you have to deal with. So now we are past that stage. Things have been demonstrated. And we now have actually 40 to 50 concepts, where back in 2008, when I started Principal Power, there was only one. And that demonstrates to you how the whole industry almost come, you know, I wouldn't call it exploding, but it's coming of age. Where you start with something new, then people realize, oh my God, this will work. This is happening, and we have to be a part of it. So while 2009, 2008, there were two types of demonstrations. One was a spar and one was a semi-submersible. Now we have a very wide variety, but at the same time, majority of the units that we see going from prototyping to demonstration are really based on the semi-submersible structure, which is this one right here. And the reason is that it is more versatile. It is easier to adapt to various mid-ocean conditions and to the ocean floors, where the spar will require something that only exists in Norway, which is a fjord, very deep protected environment, because they have to be assembled offshore. Semi-submersibles, on the other hand, can be assembled at the quay in the shipyard and then towed fully assembled to the installation site. So I will show you a video of how things are assembled. Actually, yeah, and that should give you an idea of what we are dealing with, and then we can hopefully have some time to answer the questions. Can you hear the sound? I hope you can.
I can't hear the sound.
Cannot?
No.
No.
Okay. You need to give me an ability to share the sound. So up to here, share sound. Actually, I have to share it. Okay, I will share the sound in a second, once I can get my mouse back. I just need to get the mouse. There we go. Okay, now you should be able to hear the sound. And I'll go back to here and start again. Can you hear it now? Can you hear the sound now?
Yes, it's great.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a new way of generating energy, and an important step to fight against climate change. Portugal enters in a new era with an international acclaimed solution in the production of offshore renewable energy. The WindFloat Atlantic project, formed by a consortium made up of EDP Renewables, ENGIE, Repsol, and Principal Power, is the first floating wind farm in continental Europe, just off the coast of Viana do Castelo. This floating wind farm will allow the optimization of natural resources and will speed up the commercial deployment of this innovative technology. WindFloat Atlantic is an example of a more sustainable future for mankind, with the largest turbines ever installed on floating platforms. The total installed capacity of 25 megawatts will provide sufficient energy to 60,000 people throughout the year. This energy promises an endless source. The potential of wind is immense, and this renewable energy is an essential part of the worldwide decarbonization strategy, free of CO2 emissions. The WindFloat Atlantic project is the future we envision. Our mission has begun, and we will continue to nurture the power of nature to make our planet more sustainable. WindFloat Atlantic. Energy beyond the horizon.
So this is WindFloat Atlantic. This is the installation that has been put in service at the end of 2019. And it has been producing 25 megawatts of instantaneous power ever since. It's been doing quite well with the very high capacity factors. And as you heard in the video, this particular installation provides enough energy for about 60,000 households. Now, the consumption of energy in Europe is a lot less than in the United States. So when we're looking at a proposed area that Nancy and Greg showed, that area would probably house about 3 gigawatts of offshore wind. We don't know exactly how much because we don't know what's on the bottom of the ocean floor and how much of that area can or cannot be used. But 3 gigawatts will probably provide energy to about 900,000 households or maybe 1 million, depending on the size of the turbines we're going to use and how much capacity we can extract from the wind. So it is a significant amount of energy. We are talking about very large turbines. The turbines that you see on the screen in 2019, they were 8.5 megawatts. Now the same turbine, which is produced by Vestas, have been increased in its output capacity to 9 megawatts, and it's already installed in Scotland, southeast of Aberdeen. When we're starting to look at the installation at the end of the decade or somewhere about there, we're already considering 15 megawatt turbines. So the amount of energy that will be produced by each unit is very high. And we will probably be stretching to say that it can be done on shore because the wind resources are so much stronger offshore. And there is a very good reason why the wind resources are so much stronger and more consistent. You can think of Earth as a heat sink, right? And so when the jet streams come to the Earth, they get disturbed by the Earth profile, by its geography itself, and by the heat that is emerged from the Earth. Where in the ocean, you're dealing with a very cold environment. And so the jet streams that come from Japan, they're not disturbed. They just get the whole stretch of the Pacific Ocean as a fetch, and they create very strong, consistent winds, which is why we are able to extract a lot more energy offshore and use much bigger devices offshore as well. Now, just to give you a scale, and some of it was shown in the video, it is a promotion video, and I do not yet have the one I will have eventually, which will show a little bit different scale so that you can grasp the scale. Think about Seattle Space Needle. The Space Needle, these units are going to be higher than the Space Needle. And you put the Space Needle on the floating support structure. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about very large structures. And all those structures need to be fabricated somewhere, right? And why would we do them? Or, because it makes sense. Well, there is a lot of benefits that are going to come from offshore wind, but at the same time, we do need infrastructure to be able to do things like that on the West Coast, just because the West Coast never planned to fabricate something of that nature. So from the civil engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, this is really, really an exciting opportunity, because things like that, we're living in a time when we can create an industry that right now does not exist on the West Coast. So why would offshore wind be important? Back in I think it was 2018, Castle Wind commissioned E3 to do analysis. This is not going to be happening to show the value of offshore wind. And what we found out that 10 gigawatts of installed capacity of offshore wind, this is the line. I don't know why this thing is doing what it's doing. Anyways, it basically pointed out that if California installed 10 gigawatts of offshore wind or somewhere about there, it can achieve its climate goal at the reduced cost. And the important thing on this chart, this blue line, is the offshore wind, which is the most valuable resource. Coming to Central California in particular, what would be the benefit to the Central California? This is a significant benefit in economics, besides the energy generation that can power 1 million households or somewhere abouts. This is a significant economic driver that could be realized as long as there would be infrastructure available for realization of those jobs. We talked about Diablo Canyon, or at least Greg talked about Diablo Canyon shutdown, right? This particular opportunity that exists in offshore wind and the infrastructure that will need to be developed to support that industry can potentially double the employment that the Diablo Canyon was offering, and at the same time double the revenue that could be derived and could be brought to the Central Coast. So it's significant. It's very large and it's exciting, and hopefully that will stir up a number of questions, and I'm happy to answer any of the questions you have, though I realize that we're at the top of the hour. So I'll stop right here.
Well, thank you all. That was very informative and very interesting. I tell you that if even half of that occurred, that would be totally amazing here off the Central Coast. Amy, do we have time for maybe a question, or are we out of time?
I think so. I think those of you who would like to stay on, if you're able to, we can do a few questions, and then we do still have a drawing. So I would say about 5 minutes for questions.
Okay. Fantastic. Anybody have a question out there? Well, I'll start with a question. This is for Nessie. I was curious, what from NEPA standpoint, what is the biggest environmental impact that, or what is one or two of the biggest environmental impacts that have to be mitigated, or do we know yet?
Well, I mean, there are several concerns, obviously, that we need to consider. There's vessel traffic, there's the impact on fishing, the current uses of the ocean, mammals, our marine mammals. There's a whole seabirds. There's a whole host of issues that we need to resolve. So there's not necessarily one that stands out any more than the others. I think we need to treat them all as very important, and it's not a slam dunk to get one of these things through NEPA.
I see. And then I'm just curious, between Alla and Nessie, it seems to me like you need a deep water port or something, some type of port facility. So does the BOEM process and the proposal that's being done, does it cover that new port or wherever the port will be?
We only are, looking at what's on the OCS, but certainly from an overall industry perspective, BOEM is interested in making sure that, the other things are taking place, more on a more holistic at the HQ level. We're looking at, supply chain, transmission, But our authority is really just what's on the OCS in terms of allowing for leases on them.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Lillian Jewell. She wanted to know that will any of the facilities be visible from onshore? So will you be able to see this from the shoreline?
We conducted some visual simulations. Greg mentioned those. I think if you look hard and, it's a matter of, what's an impact and how much of it you see. I mean, I think if you look really hard enough, you'll see kind of like little toothpicks on the horizon pretty much. But feel free to look at the website. That's BOEM.gov California. There are some visual simulations there. We took at different key observation points. And that's again, based on a typical project, right? Because we don't know what the project is. I believe it's a 1 gigawatt. And we pushed that layout all the way to the edge of the boundary. So it should show the max from a project perspective, but those are available on our website.
Okay, thank you. I have another question here from Ben Jensen. He was wanted to know, where would the transmission line be placed from the turbines to the shore?
It will have to traverse state waters, and from the OCS, our permitting authority is only up outside of the 3 nautical miles. So that's why there is a play here between a federal permitting and then the state permitting as well. And then from the wind energy area, from the lease area, it will go through the OCS and then to state waters and then finally onshore. And I think in the Central Coast, in terms of where it would connect, Morro Bay and Diablo Canyon are spots that are available to accept potential power.
And I think Alla mentioned that, or I think maybe it was Greg talked about the 1 gigawatt capability at Morro Bay, and then Diablo has a 2 gigawatt capability for transmission from the offshore.
Well, actually, Diablo has 6 gigawatts of transmission capability right now. So even if Diablo Canyon doesn't shut down, you have 4 gigawatts available that you can put in the line. So transmission is not really a limitation as long as it's not taken out. But even if it's taken out down the road, you will have to go through the upgrades, but it's not that difficult. So transmission on the Central Coast is good.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the advantages of the Central Coast. And CAISO, the California Integrated Systems Operator, they're conducting their studies, and based on previous studies, they've already said that there's like at least 5 to 6 gigawatts on the Central Coast.
Right.
And I see a real quick question: the closest distance to Morro Bay from the proposed lease area?
I can tell you.
It's 30 miles. Yeah, it's the corner is like 30 miles if you go from the corner to the Morro Bay to the rock.
To the rock. Okay.
If you go from the shoreline directly, it's 20. So,
okay.
This isn't off of Morro Bay, it's north of Morro Bay. I would identify it closer to Cambria, San Simeon area than Morro Bay.
Okay.
And the nearest distance is 20 miles with the current wind energy area that BOEM has forward.
Okay, so last question here, again from Lillian Jewell. Where would a port be needed? Where does the port envision to be, the service port, or is it multiple ports?
Well, that is one of the questions that needs to be answered. And you may or may not heard about the feasibility study that has been promoted by REACH, which is a regional. It's a Central Coast Economic Development Agency. So we don't know where it's going to be yet. Right now, as you can imagine, none of the ports that exist in California, period, could support these type of devices because they were never developed and they were never designed with the seawalls that can support 600-ton that will be lifted 100 meters in the air. You know, it just wasn't the requirement. Nor could the yard support that weight when you just bring the nacelle in, just transporting it. So anything we do will require infrastructure upgrade one way or another, or creating a new infrastructure. And we don't know where it's going to be. That is one of the questions we've been asking and suggesting, and the Lens Commission, the California Lens Commission, is initiating the study to look at that. But I think that needs to be done definitely sooner rather than later, because any of these developments or redevelopments will require time and money, and there definitely needs to be. And so what is it? I'm not sure if it's the county, but the REACH again has been looking for funding to conduct feasibility analysis on the infrastructure needed to support the development of offshore wind.
Yeah, that's something our office is working with the county as well, in REACH and in regional interest here on, is a feasibility study for our area. That would include Santa Barbara County and San Luis Obispo County as possible sites. But at the same time, that had begun, the State Lands Commission, just like a month ago, I want to say, approved that a more larger statewide feasibility study on not only port infrastructure, but infrastructure in general, for supply chain infrastructure and things like that, that they're going to examine. Timing is everything, so we'll see how that pans out, but there's also interest locally to look at what assets we have here. And it's been discussed that, you know, everything from, you know, a number of harbors participating, not only in just construction, but you also have operations and maintenance operations. The boats that will do the O&M component are large. They're not small. They're large boats, something that likely couldn't make it through to into Morro Bay, but maybe Port San Luis, it upgraded. And in the meantime, Humboldt Bay is in the process of building a offshore wind construction harbor. The Humboldt Bay has an underutilized deep water port, you know, that was essentially first built to ship redwood from the north coast of California, but it's got a huge area of underutilized space that they're working towards right now, and has been funded for the various studies and things like that. But that is just one, and I don't, Ala could probably elaborate on this, but you know, we've been told it's not just one port. You know, we're talking about hundreds of these windmills that will need to be constructed, and one port isn't going to be enough to facilitate full development on California in any timely basis.
Yeah, and that's correct. And you can just think about logically, these devices, you know, the picture or the device that I showed you, which is wind float, on the side, that triangle is going to be about, you know, 70 to 100 meters. Okay, so that's big. You're talking about 12,000 tons of steel that needs to be transported. If you may remember the picture or the barge that was used to transport this substructure from the fabrication yard to the installation to the port, to the facility where they put the turbine on top of it. So imagine that the unit has been constructed. It is 700 feet tall, 700 to 800 feet tall. A lot of steel. And now you need to transport it. You're going to be moving at about 4 to 5 knots speed. Imagine that you would be building it in Humboldt and transporting it to Central Coast at 5 knots speed. How long is it going to take you? It's going to take you a week to get from here to there. Okay, now add to it transmission emissions that you will be encountering. And now you're transporting 300 units to fulfill the installation or something of that nature. That type of thinking needs to come in to say, where should I put the port and how? Because distance matters, time matters, emissions matter. all of that needs to be taken in consideration. That's what Greg was alluding, and that's what I mentioned, that feasibility study that REACH is trying to fund. That's what needs to be looked at, saying, okay, here's what we need to do, we should build it, and what impacts is going to give you, the cost benefits analysis really needs to be conducted as a part of that feasibility study.
I think one challenge for engineers would be if they could figure out how to make the Golden Gate Bridge a drawbridge. That would really facilitate a lot of harbor space in Richmond and Oakland and places that were used during World War II to build battleships. So
yes, indeed.
That's the scale and size of things that we're talking about here. Port Hueneme is also part of the discussion. But as you've all read about our deep water ports impacted by, the backup and delay, and every one of them are as busy as can be, and shipments wait offshore. So
Right.
Finding space is going to be a serious challenge. Port space, a serious challenge for the future of this, but there's time, and BOEM's got its process, which gives us the ability to work on some of the other infrastructure things in the meantime, but it's definitely daunting.
So, Greg, we can still use the Bay Area to do the substructure fabrication, right? That will fit under the Golden Gate Bridge. The question becomes, where do I put the turbine on?
Right.
Which is now makes it 700, 800 feet
Yeah.
high.
Right.
So that's the challenge.
That would be definitely a big challenge. Well, I want to thank the panelists today. It was a very informative talk. We really appreciate your time. I'm sure there'll be more coming out about wind energy offshore in the near future. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Amy. Amy, to finish out the meeting.
Thank you all. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. For your time, we have a little thank you gift. Andrea is going to show it. We have a little water bottle for each of you.
Yes.
APWA water bottle.
Thank
So we'll
you.
be sending those
So
to you.
in order to show our appreciation, we are going to be sending you this speaker gift. It says "Proud to Care" on it. So I'll be following up with each of you to get your mailing addresses. But thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And
Thank
then
you.
before you all hop off, we do have our drawing for those of you who attended today. So we're going to do a raffle. Leroy, are you able to share the raffle?
Yes.
Awesome.
Let's see. There we go. Okay. So we have a $25 gift certificate for a local restaurant, or if you're not local, like a Grubhub type of certificate that you can
It's
use.
DoorDash. Yeah.
DoorDash.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And so I've input everybody's name about when we're in the middle of the presentation. So some people may have gone. If you have my email, it's L Cadena. That's LCADENA at COSBPW.net. If you email me, we'll get you your certificate. So here we go. Oh, looks like Carlos Sanchez is our winner.
Woohoo.
Is
Yay.
Carlos still here?
I'm not sure.
I'm looking. Don't see Carlos. Does anybody know how to get a hold of Carlos?
I believe I
work
can
with
get you his.
Carlos. Sorry, I work with Carlos. I could let him know to email you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much. Thank you
for-
all and have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Amy.